This is my Analogue Pocket Aluminium Edition, and believe it or not, this was the first Analogue Pocket I ever actually laid hands on. I didn't really have a base for comparison with a plastic one until now. So yeah, when I got my aluminium Analogue Pocket, this was actually the first time I'd laid hands on an Analogue Pocket console. So although I was giving you my opinions on it, I didn't really have a good base for comparison on the same sort of console that other people have experienced before. So I got a new one, treated myself for Christmas, and got the Dandelion Game Boy Color Edition in plastic. So now's the time I can look at the two side by side and take a quick look. Before we start, this is going to be a fairly informal video, more of a ramble about my new toy, about how it compares to the metal one that I've owned for the last few months. It's not going to be a big in-depth technical video. That's going to be something that you'll find elsewhere. This is more about the user experience of it. I've spoken to quite a few people recently who are thinking about maybe getting an Analogue Pocket, and certainly while I would say don't get the aluminium one because it's just far too expensive for what it is, the plastic one may have some merit, but I couldn't really go for it and say definitely get it without having experienced that for myself. So in this video, I'll go over what it is, what it can do, why I got it, and how I feel about the differences between the metal edition and the plastic edition. So let's take a look. Right, so what we've got here is the Analogue Pocket. This is like a modern day Game Boy. It uses what's called FPGA technology to mimic the original hardware. It does actually have a cartridge slot in the back, which can accommodate Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games. You can also get adapters to play other games as well, but the console has the slot so you can put the cartridge in the back. You switch on with a press to hold power button on the side, and when it boots up, you see an Analogue logo here. It loads up to this simple menu. We're going to go play cartridge. It'll bring up the details about the cartridge that's inserted. You just go on play and it will load it as you go there. So yeah, what we've got here is just like a really modern version of the Game Boy experience. A large size upscaled screen, stereo speakers on the side instead of the original mono speaker at the bottom. The ergonomics are nice. It's comfortable to use. It's got little shoulder buttons for when you're playing Game Boy Advance. It is a very capable thing, and even though it's got like this hard edge around the front here, it's relatively comfortable to hold. The ergonomics are actually pretty good. It's got like these stripes down the side here. It is a very good experience of playing the Game Boy, and you just play it as you normally would a Game Boy. It works absolutely fine, and it has the D-pad, it has A and B button, and also X and Y, which you wouldn't have had on any of the original Game Boy consoles. But that is because of this FPGA technology that's in it and the capability to run other systems as well. So there are 3 buttons rather than you start and select. There's one down here as well, which can bring you to the analog menu, and we can quit cartridge and then just confirm that we're going to lose any progress that we've made, and we're going to take a look at OpenFPGA. It starts with a fairly minimal interface, but when you update it online, you can use an SD card. So a core is like an instruction to send to the chips in here, which are these FPGA chips, to get them to behave as another piece of hardware, to put it in very simple terms. You've got handhelds such as Game Boy Advance, Game Boy, Game & Watch, Game Gear, and so on. You've got consoles, various different consoles that it can emulate as well. You've got computers, arcade machines, all sorts of stuff, and loads of things that you can do. Actually, it's very simple to do that. I do all of my stuff on a Mac. I use a piece of software called Pupdate. Put your SD card in the computer, you drag and drop the Pupdate file on there, execute it, and it just does everything for you. It's very straightforward. And now I've got a system that not only will play my Game Boy game, but also, for example, if I go in OpenFPGA Arcade, we'll go 1943, comes up with, again, the information about the game. You can actually change the core on some systems, or sometimes there's just one core to go with. So I'll just go run, and then you can choose different alternatives. So I'll go on that one and it will just load up the game. And with it being a relatively square ratio screen, even vertical games will work quite well, and the controls are all set up to just run perfectly. So you can run loads and loads of different stuff on this, and it works really nicely. If you want to exit the game, you can just go on here and go on quit. If you want to store your progress, some systems will allow you to have save states. You just momentarily hold the analog button and press up and it'll store a save state, and then when you're in here and you go to memories, you can load up save state. They don't always work. Like if I'm in arcade mode at the moment, or Super Nintendo for instance, you can't do save states, but on some systems like Game Boy, Game Boy Advance and so on, you can. So if I go on quit there and confirm, I just want to show you one of the things that's absolutely fantastic about this OpenFPGA is that you can use these different cores. So if I go to handheld and I'll go to Game Boy and I'll go change core, there's a number of different cores on there rather than just the standard one. And this Voodoo 2 one has a number of different settings. If I load up Tetris there, the overlay that I've got on this at the moment looks just like the original Game Boy. It's uncanny, the pixel grid and so on. So you can get really fantastic settings on these and basically run this as though it were a Game Boy. So yeah, this is a new one that I got, and this is the one that I've had for a little while. This is the Aluminium Edition. I have very much enjoyed it, and bizarrely, even though it is the same console, it's quite a different experience using it. Now, it's quite cold out in the shed, so it is quite cold, and you can see there's a lot of kind of condensation coming on there from my hand. But picking it up and it being very cold to the touch, like this is very solid, very heavy unit. It is immensely satisfying, and all the parts, all the buttons and everything else are aluminium. On this one, it's entirely plastic. So if I go to OpenFPGA on this one, I'll go on handheld, I'll go on Game Boy and just change core and get it on. Yeah, that's just on the standard core, so we can see the difference. I'm going to go on run, we'll go on Tetris there, and you can just kind of see the difference between the two, because this also looks really good, but it's more of a kind of a solid picture, and this one is with the pixel grid layout on it. So if I go on the start on that one and on that one, you can see like this one very much looks like the original. That's not an issue with this console, that's just the setting that I've got. If I go on here, you've got core settings and you can load up all sorts of different palettes and things like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go quit, confirm, I'm then going to go OpenFPGA, handheld, Game Boy, change core and go on this one, and then run Tetris again. It's not going to load up looking like this. What you have to do is you change your settings. So we go on core settings, display mode, and I'm going to go on original GB DMG, come back out of there, and you've got that setting. So side by side, both of these are the same. In fact, you could play two-player Tetris on this because it also has the slot in the bottom for the original link cable, so you can play two-player. It has an see, you've got a lot of my condensation, but that's largely because this is so cold. It is cold out here and I'm not cold. But it's got an internal battery, it's rechargeable via USB-C. Everything else on here is the same. There are a few subtle differences that I have noticed. It is slightly different in size. When I lay them down side by side, this is raised ever so slightly. It's very, very slightly thicker than the aluminium one. There's more plastic at the front. The buttons do feel quite different, even though they're the same shape and size and so on. The movement of the metal ones I feel is a bit more kind of friction free on the sides there. What I was finding was I'm having to press a little bit firmer on the plastic one, particularly with the power button on the side and things. There's a bit more of a satisfying click with the aluminium. However, one of the issues I was having with this was the kind of double inputs. Sometimes when I go to rotate just 90 degrees on Tetris, it'll do a 180 with this. This does still suffer from that same issue, however, not nearly as much as I'm getting with the aluminium one. Also, the D-pad isn't great. It does have sort of false diagonals. That's the same as this one. It happens, but I have kind of got used to it over time. But the front edge, yeah, this edge here is a little sharper on the Aluminium Edition. The surface on the aluminium one is very, very smooth. It's very smooth to the touch, and it does feel really nice. The plastic one, to get this kind of matte finish, it is a very slightly textured surface. It's not really a visible texture, but you can definitely feel it. It's a little rougher to the touch than this one. Obviously, the biggest difference is the weight. The plastic one is 272 grams, and the aluminium one is 397. So it's not like it's twice as heavy. It is significantly heavier. There is definitely a difference when you actually hold it. However, I wouldn't say it makes it unusable. There's just a kind of a satisfying heft to it. In terms of all the other buttons and everything else, that's all the same. You'll notice in here I've got the rumble pack. That's because you'll note, like I was playing Pokemon Pinball earlier. If I was playing that on here, if I go to OpenFPGA, handheld, Game Boy Color, Pokemon Pinball, that will run. So this cartridge is a funny shape because it takes a battery and it's got a little vibration motor inside it. Whereas if you are emulating it, you don't get that vibration unless you use the Nintendo DS rumble pack. It's got to be the one for the original DS. Doesn't work with the DS Lite one, but that will actually rumble in the game, or any other game that uses rumble like Drill Dozer. If you haven't got the original cartridge and you're running it from the hardware, then that works quite nicely. Now, it is really, really cool to have all of those things built into the SD card and be able to just transport them wherever you like. Also, I find having the rumble pack in there means it kind of protects the cartridge slot. It doesn't have it exposed like it is here for dust and corrosion and things like that. So obviously there's the thing of having a cartridge in there all the time, puts pressure on the pins, so there might be one argument for and against. But yeah, that's my two consoles. I bought this one. I felt terrible about having spent so much money, like an obscene amount of money on this. Once it factored in how much it cost and the shipping costs and tax and everything else, I spent hundreds of pounds on this. It is really, really nice. I love it. I play on it a lot, but this does everything that this does, and it's a little lighter, so it's easier to transport. It behaves in exactly the same way. There is nothing that this does, no special features on this that this doesn't have. So while I find it very hard to recommend this despite it being good, like I say, I wasn't sure about recommending a plastic one because I hadn't experienced it myself. Even though it's plastic, it still feels very premium. It's still really nice to play. Your hands and arms don't get as tired because you're not holding something that's as heavy. Yeah, I am very pleased. So yeah, as I said, it wasn't going to be a hugely detailed video, but I am absolutely made up with this. I love a yellow console. If you know my channel, you will know I am a sucker for anything yellow. I think I might part ways with the aluminium one at some point, but for the moment, I'm going to keep playing on the two, comparing notes and seeing if one takes a particular mood, one takes another. What do you think I should do? Do you think I should keep both? Do you think that's a stupid thing to do? Do you think I should sell the aluminium one and just try and get some of those stupid costs back? So that's my first impressions of the plastic Analogue Pocket, and I have got to say I love it. It is a much easier recommendation than this one, which although is a fantastic console, I cannot heartily say anyone should spend that sort of money on what is essentially a Game Boy. However, if you want to know a little bit more about it and see my experiences with it when I first got it, I've got a couple of videos I'll leave linked up there. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.